think, whose ministries have dedicated in different ways to helping people find home in faith. Our first guest is someone many of you will already know, Father James Martin. I think whose ministries. Father Martin is a Jesuit priest, author, editor, speaker, and one of the most recognizable Catholic voices in the world today. Through his book, his media work, and his ministry, he has encouraged countless people to encounter God with honesty, compassion, and hope. Tonight, however, we are also celebrating something a little different. His newest book, Work in Progress. It's not simply another theological work. It's a memoir, a collection of stories that remind us that spiritual life is often found not only in grand moments, but in ordinary experiences, relationships, mistakes, lessons learned, and acts of kindness. As the title suggests, it's a story of a life still being shaped by grace. Joining him is Father Castello, Director of Vocations for the Old Catholic Missionary Province of North America. He's a spiritual director and pastor of Christ the Healer, an LGBTQ inclusive community. Through his ministry, Father Castello has accompanied many people seeking to reconcile faith, identity, and vocation, as well as belonging. His work reflects a deep commitment to pastoral care, creating spaces where people can encounter God's healing presence. Together, both of them bring not only experience and wisdom, but a shared conviction that every person's story, no matter how small, counts, and that God still works each one of them. So please join me in welcoming Father Martin and Father Castello.
Thank you so much. Man, between the accent and the introduction, I think we can go home. So I'm going to just piggyback from the beginning, Father Martin, and say what Johann just said, which is this is different. You've written a lot of books. You've been around a long time. You've been, in the trenches of spiritual direction with people, helping them heal their souls, and you've been all the way at the Vatican with Pope Francis and Pope Leo. Why write a book about your life now?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for inviting me. Thanks to the Bigfoot Bookstore. Thanks to everyone who is joining us online, which is a lot of fun. And thanks for live streaming this. Yeah, I wrote this book. It's kind of a funny story. At least I think it's funny. I was here. I write my books. This is my room at the America House Jesuit Community in New York. And I write here and also in my office. And my last two books were pretty serious. My last book was called Come Forth, The Promise of Jesus' Greatest Miracle, which was on the raising of Lazarus, which, is a joyful event, but it was a pretty, kind of serious book. And the one before that I wrote during COVID, actually right here in my room, was called Learning to Pray, which was a guide to prayer, just basically teaching people how to pray. And I wanted something a little lighter. And so I just started, as I got finished the Come Forth book, I just started writing summer job experiences, which I had told to friends. These are job experiences from basically the 70s, and the subtitle tells it, Confessions of a Busboy, Dishwasher, Caddy, Usher, Factory Worker, Bank Teller, Corporate Tool, and Priest. Including, I left out waiter and lawnmower and paperboy because the editor said it was too long on the cover. But I wanted something fun to write and just to sort of enjoy. And I sent it to my publisher and I said, I have this book now of kind of funny summer job stories. And she said, well, you can't just have a book about funny summer jobs. And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, people are going to want more. So if you talk also about your post-collegiate years and your work at General Electric, again, I talk about interviewing it in Winston-Salem, and then talk about entering the Jesuits, it can become a kind of vocation story, which is what happened. So this book on summer jobs is now, more or less in two parts. Kind of the first part is kind of funny summer jobs, and the book is lighthearted all the way throughout. The second part is really on finding God and sort of understanding who I am as a person. So that's how it started. It started because I needed a break from some of the serious stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember reading a book by Amy Laura Hall, Laughing at the Devil, about Julian of Norwich. And she talks a lot about how St. Julian of Norwich really discourage people from living their whole life as if it's an end to a means. And I think the current climate we're in that's so charged by activism, which is great, it can rob us of like this consciousness of joy and gratitude and goodness for the journey that we're on personally. And I think that the agenda of oppression is to disconnect us. And I notice in your book just how you're connected to yourself, you're connected to the jovialness and of your own humanity. But also, I kind of see a mixture of complaining and gratitude. And I wonder, Jim, if you could tell the people that are listening, is God okay with complaining and gratitude? And how do we kind of mix the two in this crazy world that we live in?
Yeah, well, I would say I'll ask you since you're a spiritual director, what you think about that. What do you think about that question before I answer?
I think that it's very rare that people get to the sweet water of joy without passing through the bitter water of recognition. That
Well,
people really need to be able to be ticked off of it before they can be happy. The reason is I think that denial often leads us to this fleeting happiness, like a spark of happiness. But when we recognize our pain and community and we say, yes, the oppressor is real. Yes, this pain is real, but yet God is trustable. That's when we get to the joy.
I think that's true. I think it's part of human nature and part of the human condition. I totally agree with that. That's a very elegant way of putting it. I also think that, God has been listening to complaints ever since the Psalms.
Yeah.
I mean, Psalm 13 is how long, O Lord? And, the people of Israel complain when Moses brings them out into the desert. Why have you brought us? I like that complaint. It's why have you brought us to this place with no food? And the food is terrible, right?
Mm.
Which is kind of funny.
It's like
It's
a
like
plane
it's
on
like
in New York that you hear. It's like right living now.
it's like the old joke about the couple that goes into a restaurant and says, "Man, this food here is so bad," and the wife says, "Yeah, and the portions are so small too." So I think we all, I think being upset about things and being frustrated about things and being sad about things is just natural. I think if you weren't sad or angry or frustrated, you would be a robot. So part of being in a relationship with God and being honest with God, like being honest in any relationship and wanting a good and deep relationship, is being honest about what you're struggling with. And, in this book, I talk about, a lot of the parts of these jobs. I mean, as I said, the book is pretty lighthearted. And, you can tell that from the cover. But there are, and there are a lot of funny stories in there. But there are stories of also humiliation and embarrassment and messing up when I was young. And I think, oh, we have to also embrace the difficult parts of your story too, because that helps make you who you are. Interestingly, this week Pope Leo came out with his encyclical Magnificat Humanitas, and he talked about how struggle and suffering and pain it's simply part of life, and it's stuff it helps us learn things. That's not what God doesn't sort of punish us that way, but it's just part of life. And so I think the complaining is part of life too.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the most difficult things, not that this is part of your story necessarily, but one of the most unique experiences that humans have is the raising by their parents. And there's a part in your book where you talk about your dad and how he loved sports. And you kind of were not really into this whole sports thing. You had this ambivalent role, and you really didn't have a clue when you were a caddy much about golf. But the thing that struck me when you talked about your dad is you did recognize that within sports, you realize that everybody has a talent. Everybody has a place in the world. Everybody has a place on the team. And I think as humanity continues to be tempted toward steeping in despair, can you talk about the the vocational discovery of talent and giftedness for the people that are listening to breathe some hope into them?
Yeah, I think the key is to say that I think the blessing of being an adult is to say, like I can say this now, I am terrible at basketball. I'm a terrible basketball player. Like I'm pretty good at tennis and I'm a good runner and
Mhm.
what else am I good at? I mean, other sports, but I'm terrible at basketball. And I'm okay at baseball and softball. I'm terrible at football. I could not have said that as a teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, I could not have uttered those words because it was so, for a boy in the 1960s and 1970s, it was so humiliating to say, I'm not a good athlete or I'm not good in this sport. You had to kind of pretend. And so one of the graces of age and the graces of wisdom, I think, is to be able to say, I'm good at this, but not good at that, right? A realistic appraisal of your skills. I'm a good writer. I think I'm a pretty good homilist. I think I tell good jokes, you know. I'm not great at sports or especially basketball. I like playing tennis. I'm a pretty good artist. I'm terrible at fill in the blanks. You know, I can't remember things. I have a terrible sense of direction. You know, for example, I forget things. I forget names. I'm terrible with names. So we have all these skills, and I think to be able to say we are a mixed bag of things that we can do and things that we can't do, and that's okay. You know, and it's okay. And I think to be able to say that to a child, which I think my dad, my both of my parents are dead now. My mom died about 2 months ago. I think my dad, you know, was okay with that, but he really wanted me to be good in sports and enjoy it the way he did. And for a kid in the 60s, I see our audience is a little young. There was a kind of a sort of expectation that you would be good. And the father sort of, I didn't want to say force you, but really tried to make you good. The same way they would try to make you do well in school. Do you know what I mean?
I
Not out
do.
of any sense of meanness, but like I
And
want
like
you
the
to
sense
succeed.
of sports prodigy back then. I mean, we talk about the stories of like Tiger Woods and his father and kind of this. I'm going to make you a champion.
Yeah, I was definitely not a sports prodigy, but I think the idea was in as much as you would want and encourage your kid to do well in school, which I think is, you know, kind of still acceptable, you would do the same for sports. Um,
Yeah.
I think that the gift of parents today is that they can say to their kids, that's okay. You don't have to like it. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to play Little League. Back then, if you were a boy, you played Little League. I mean, or you were, something was wrong with you. I mean, you were seen as wrong. And so I had to kind of make my peace with that. And I was really happy I put that in the book. A lot of men have told me that that's very meaningful to them. And yet to be able to recognize that my dad was trying to show his love that way by bringing me into his world.
Right. It's powerful. It shows us that human strength shows up in so many different ways. That
Mhm.
it's not about brute. I mean, you know, you've spent a lot of your life like helping people strengthen their soul, and that's what's powerful about Pope Leo's encyclical is it's redirecting humanity toward what actually makes us strong, which is dignity and honor and respect and presence. And I know that another thing that people have kind of a panic about right now in the world that Pope Leo talks about later on in his encyclical is the injustice of unemployment. And that's so powerful right now because people are jobless. And for me, when I read this encyclical the other day, I noticed that sense of unemployment. And I've always thought of unemployment as like simply in injustice, but also a really deep inconvenience. But the Holy Father makes it explicit that unemployment, particularly at a certain rate, is a grave evil. And can you speak some hope into a society where jobs are beginning to be less and less, not only less and less numerable, but also the concept of a living wage is not as big of a deal as it used to be.
Yeah, well, Pope Leo wrote this encyclical Magnificat Humanitas on the 135th anniversary of an earlier encyclical called Rerum Novarum, uh, which was the beginning of Catholic social teaching that talked about the right to a just wage, the right to organize, labor's rights, unions, all these kinds of things, as a way in the 19th century pushing back against a lot of the robber barons and a lot of the, you know, injustices. And today, Pope Leo is talking about the same kinds of injustices, although in the digital world. Now, what does that mean? Well, one thing is the amount of power and money that are concentrated among just a few people. And as we all know, that those divides have just gotten more. I mean, the divides between, like the top 0.01% and the bottom 50%, it's something like the top 0.01% earns as much as the bottom 50%, which no matter how you slice it is just unjust. I mean, it's unjust in that people don't need that much money. No one needs to be a trillionaire. I mean, how many yachts and boats and apartment buildings do you really need? So he's pointing out this injustice. He's also pointing out the injustice of decision making, that people are not involved in the decisions that affect them, their communities and whatnot. I mean, to take a simple example, I just read an article today about these data centers that are sucking up all this energy and water, because of AI, and they just move into these towns and people have no say over it. So that's the kind of injustice that Magnificat Humanitas is talking about. I talk a little bit about that in my book, in Work in Progress, a little bit about kind of economic injustice and what I learned at Wharton and how it was, in a sense, rebutted by some of the stuff I learned on my summer jobs and then afterwards at GE.
All right. I'm so glad you did this, and it's so important to me to open up to one question that's going to be online, and then a couple of questions from people here in person. But let's contemplatively travel for a minute into the hearts of people that are listening, and into the hearts of the collective people across the world, which is, we all know what it's like to lay there at night, to feel disconnected from ourselves, to feel hopeless. And one of the things that you have done that is powerful, I mean, you're selling this book, you're doing really well, and you're wanting to get it to the hands of many people. But one of the most powerful things about Jesuits is that they write and they document and they notice the movement of the Holy Spirit in people's lives. When people are sitting there at night, they're questioning themselves, they're questioning their connection to their neighbors, they're questioning their God. They don't have hope. What's something that they can do to connect with God, their neighbor, and themselves, similar to the fact that you went back in your memory and noticed the movements of God in these very ordinary ways?
Well, I think just that. The book is really a kind of extended memory prayer where I go back and I recover things and share them with people. And one of the points of the book is that if God can work through the life of a 15-year-old busboy at the Ice Cream Inn in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, God can work through anybody's life. And one of the ways to start incorporating that, and if you are lying in bed or worried or struggling or frustrated, is to do a prayer that we Jesuits like, which is called the examination of conscience, which sounds terrible, but it's basically a review of the day. And you look back and you sort of start from the morning and you go through lunchtime, noon, afternoon, nighttime, dinner, right? And you try to say, where did I experience God? In what conversations and moments, and maybe just looking outside, in beautiful Asheville, or maybe meeting a friend at a bookstore or having a delicious croissant or something. Where did I meet God? And what happens is when you're able to look back and see where God was, it's easier to see the next day where God is. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you run into you get a text from a friend and it just lifts your spirits. A friend recognizes something you did or says thank you or just lifts you up in some way. And you say, gosh, I'm so glad for that friend, whoever that is, friend X or friend Y. The next time you meet her, you're going to be grateful for her. You're going to recognize her as someone who's kind of a carrier of grace. And that comes from looking back. That comes from really being able to kind of contemplate that and savor that and raise that person up and thank God. So I think these memory prayers at the end of the day, again, we call them the examination of conscience, can be very helpful for helping people find God in their lives.
It's amazing. I'll land with this and then we'll open it up for people. Stephen, did you figure out the person online? Okay. And that is, when you were talking about memory, I love how the narrative of the Eucharist goes from the night he was betrayed to Jesus saying do this in memory of me. And I think it's powerful, and remembering what God has done, I really believe is always a worthy practice. So I'm going to open the floor to the people that are in the room, and I want like you to raise your hand if you'd like to ask Father Martin a question. This is, what's your name?
Ripple, R-I-P.
Ripple is in the room, and you're getting ready to be asked something very profound by Ripple. There's about to be a ripple effect.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I know you have. It's not original.
Well, so, Phil Martin was just talking about how, if you look back on your day and pinpoint where you found God, I mean, in my mind, that creates a distinction between where God was and where he was not in your day. And then comparing that to something he said earlier, which is that God is everywhere. I think my question is, how do you find God in, like a Palestinian child being crushed to death under an Israeli missile strikes rubble, and what could possibly make that okay?
Yeah, I would say nothing makes that okay.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the question of, why is there suffering, is really, I think, unanswerable, because any
Okay.
answer that I would give would be, like kind of banal. But I think you're early, so I agree. We have to look at those things as part of life, and also as part of, in other words, the emotions. I've always feel that the emotions we feel in response to that, the compassion, the desire to help, the desire to sometimes protest, the desire to really do something, is God. Is God kind of working within us? Because otherwise, how else is God going to work? Your earlier question is a really interesting one. Yeah, and I'm not saying that God is in some place but not in another place in your life. I think God's everywhere in your day. What I'm saying is that a lot of times we just ignore stuff, So the examination and looking back is saying, what are the moments that I especially recognize God and that I can be grateful for, Because otherwise we just like overlook it. Because I think that the tendency that I'm working against is the tendency to just like move on to the next day,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you don't really pause and be grateful and say thank you. And then you move on to the next day and you kind of forget stuff. And I think a lot of us, particularly in the West and in the United States, are kind of action oriented. And it's like on to the next thing. You know what I mean? Rather than just kind of savoring it, saying thank you, taking that kind of quiet time and space and just being with those moments. So, yeah, but God's, I think, in every moment of our day. It's just a question of our noticing. That's a very good question, though. Thank you.
You-
Anyone else that's here in the room?
Don't be shy.
Can I just express my gratitude for something that you just said?
Absolutely.
Which is just that
Hey, you're doing it already. You're doing it already.
which is just that I appreciate that you acknowledge that there's a quality to the suffering in this world and the questions that it raises that are unanswerable, because I think that's where my challenge can arise in response to some people of faith that I've met, is that faith provides all of the answers and it provides all of the solutions, and I appreciate you being able to make room for the fact that we can't know everything, and that's okay.
It is okay. And it's I think, the invitation which is hard, is to believe in a God you don't understand fully, that's part of it. I mean, my mom suffered a great deal in her last couple of days. And, what's the answer to that? I mean, it's not, was she being punished? No, that's baloney. She was 94 and she had suffered already. Is it to make her a better person? No, she's dying, So the answer is it's kind of mysterious, right? And I don't think we'll know until we get a chance to ask God. But I think you're right. I think anyone who gives you easy answers for suffering, you should run the other way. I mean, that's just because it just doesn't work. Otherwise that would have been solved a long time ago. Yeah.
There's also a big word in Jesuit spirituality called dialectical.
Mhm.
And what does
Yeah.
that mean? Well, it just means that two things can be true at once.
Mhm.
And I think when the heat of life gets on, the pressure gets on, the feeling of this tug of war between, I can really trust God, he's great, and the suffering in the world makes him look like he's a crappy God. It's totally always gonna be there, but it feels more present when suffering is most intense.
It does. And that's why if you read Pope Leo's encyclical, it's quite profound on suffering and not explaining it, but just saying this is part of life. And this sort of move towards what is called transhumanism and posthumanism and all that, in the sense that we're gonna never suffer, never be sick, or always have perfect brains or something. That's just not the human condition. That's just not who we are as human beings. So yeah, those are good questions though.
And it was a vision. I mean, when Steve Jobs started Apple, he said he wanted to reverse the curse of Adam and Eve fully and move that. And that sounds great, but it really is terrible in many ways. A world without suffering, it disconnects us, and that sounds quasi, but it's true. There's a disconnection that happens.
Yeah, and I think some people might hear this and think, well, I would want a world without suffering. I don't want to suffer, but I think the problem is what happens is that it then makes people who are have limitations and frailties and maybe some sort of disability, right, feel less than because I'm not perfect. I don't have a perfect body. And so therefore there should be no limitations. We should transcend things and the real human is the human that has no weaknesses and no bodily problems and illnesses, and which is just, in other words, so there's this kind of aspirational desire for those kinds of things among some people. But then when you are sick and when you are not producing, that's a big part of the encyclical. That doesn't mean that you have any less value. I mean, one of the best parts of the encyclical was Pope Leo saying one of the insidious ideologies is this idea that if we don't produce, we're nothing. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, it's something we could definitely go on and on about. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to ask a question present in the
I
room?
think too, there's a disconnect too, talking about those that suffer. Through the various things and those who might not experience suffering in the same way. Because when you're that 0.1% and you're not suffering by not having enough or having access to medical care and things like that, versus like everybody else who suffering causes people to come together into community and to connect with one another. I think that's one of the things that's kind of happening is that some people, and I might be totally off by this, but like the people who have everything they need and aren't experiencing suffering on a regular basis have no need for that connection to find.
I think
Yeah.
that's true. I think that's
Yeah.
I would debate that the idea of an absence of suffering in the presence of material abundance, though.
Yeah,
I think there can be an
well said.
emptiness.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
An emptiness that comes when you
Absolutely.
realize that no matter how much stuff you accumulate, no matter how much money you accumulate, there's still gonna be a feeling of lack inside of you.
I think it's true. I think it's true.
I think that's true. I think there's lots of kinds of suffering. I think to the first point, it is true that I think a lot of the rich want to insulate themselves from the sufferings of the poor. They just don't want to see them. I mean, they literally don't want to be in the same place with them. They want to have walls around them, sometimes physically walls around them. They don't want to go through the slums. They don't want to, encounter them. Pope Francis talked a lot about the culture of encounter, actually being with people. But to the second point, I would say that's also true as well, that there's a lot of psychological suffering among the wealthy and among the celebrities. I mean, how many times have we read stories about celebrities, doing all sorts of crazy things because they're lonely and all that kind of stuff? I've known a lot of people who are pretty wealthy and well known, and they're not all happy. Some of them are pretty miserable. So I think there's lots of different kinds of suffering. I think that the challenge again in this encyclical is to include people whose voices are usually not included. The poor, the disenfranchised, the marginalized, right? I mean, And I think that's what Pope Leo has really put his finger on, that when it comes to decisions about the economy, and in particular about AI, there's like a handful of people making these decisions about all of us. And he said that's not a good way of proceeding.
Yeah. We have a question online,
Okay.
and is it gonna be the same woman? And
Yep.
she's gonna come on, and this is Sarah Damewood.
Well, hey, can you hear me?
Hi, Sarah.
She's a big
Hi.
fan.
Okay, so I haven't seen Father Jim in years, even though I follow him every day. But you can't see me, right? You can just hear me, right?
Nice to hear you, though.
So, and Father Costello, I met coincidentally up at in Asheville, Black Mountain, for a workshop with Kathy Norris and Gareth Higgins. So it was really a weird coincidence. Anyway, my question is, in chapter 3, you shared how you learned to love nature through that religious experience that you had in the meadow, and also how you love to read. So throughout your life, have you found opportunities to experience both at the same time, such as reading in nature or reading books that have inspired appreciation of nature? And if so, which books? And I'm actually thinking about the time that you told us you were reading about the history of Central Park. You remember that so many years ago?
I do.
You were
I
reading
do.
a book on Central.
Well,
So,
Sarah, Sarah, thank you for that
Yeah.
question. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
Oh, so I just say, would that be one of the books, or are there others you'd recommend? And I'll shut up.
No, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's good to be with you and good to hear you. And I know you remembered that meadow story from a while ago. I remember that very well, and the gift you gave me about the meadow, which was lovely. I think I've been always someone who has really enjoyed nature. I don't think I would have been able to admit that when I was younger, because it seems like not something for a boy. But I've always liked flowers and trees and springtime, and I've just always found it fascinating. There are parts of nature I don't like. I don't like bugs and spiders and all that kind of stuff, poison ivy. But I've always found it beautiful. And for those of you who have not read the book, there's a moment when I'm about 9 or 10 years old where I'm biking through kind of a meadow or a sort of undeveloped plot of land, where I have a real sense of longing for God. And looking back on that, I really remember it very vividly. And looking back on it, I see it as one of the first experiences I have of really sort of longing for God. And I liked, as Sarah said, in that chapter, I talk about really enjoying reading. It's funny though, Sarah, the two things are often not connected with me. I like to read like in a room that's away from nature so I don't get mosquito bites and all that kind of stuff, so I can concentrate. And when I'm in nature, I don't like, when I'm sort of in nature, I like to focus on that. So those are kind of two separate things. I do like reading about nature though. And I think my favorite author would be someone like Annie Dillard, who I know, probably the bookstore owner knows all about her, who wrote a lot about nature, and also the poet Mary Oliver, who really does do a lot of poetry about nature and flowers. And I like reading about birds and flowers, and I know that sounds a little dull, but I enjoy that kind of literature. So I would say when I think about nature writing, I would say Annie Dillard, Mary Oliver. There was a fellow named Vernon Klinkenborg who used to write for the New York Times. He had a column on nature, which I really liked. But mostly I like just being in nature. I have a garden on the rooftop of our Jesuit community that I'm just so happy to have
Who's
flowers.
sparking jealousy amongst the people right now?
Well, you guys live in North Carolina. I mean, I'm sure you have nicer lawns than I do.
We do okay. We do.
I also live in New York, which is, I tell you, I actually can. I will show you the view out my window. You ready?
Oh no.
This is the view out my beautiful New York window. I mean, it is not very nice.
Oh, the
So
sliver of heaven.
Next time you feel jealous of me, just think of that view.
Goodness. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to Stephen. He's the owner of the bookstore, and then I wanna land by talking a little bit about spiritual direction. And actually, the woman who trained me in spiritual direction is on the call, and I want to let the land want to land the plane, just mention.
Sure.
About
I do want to say Patricia Robinson is saying, will the recording of this be available anywhere? I have to leave for appointment and
Absolutely.
nodding of a head. And then also
Absolutely.
there's also for another one from Virginia Blast, maybe we could get to later.
Yeah.
All right, great. I'm sorry, Stephen.
You're good. Take your time.
I just want to thank Sarah for that question and bringing up chapter 3, which is entitled How Poltergeists, Aliens, and Bigfoot Prevented Me from Getting Rich. So can you tell us more about chapter 3 and Bigfoot, your own personal connection to Bigfoot?
Not only will I, but I have to. I was so tickled when I saw that the name of the bookstore is the Bigfoot Bookstore. And I have Bigfoot socks. So I have 2 pairs of Bigfoot socks. Thank you very much.
Bigfoot socks.
I have Bigfoot socks. I have Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster socks. So what does that mean? So the story in the 3rd chapter is about my having a so-called lawn mowing business when I was about 14, business in quotes. And I wanted to make thousands of dollars so I could buy myself a pup tent. I can still remember this. And yet what I liked to do most of all was read. And this being the 1970s, late 1960s, early 1970s, one of the things that was really in the air was the paranormal, the supernatural. There was a television show called In Search Of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, Dr. Spock or Mr. Spock from Star Trek. In any event, Bigfoot was a big deal. I was fascinated by that. So I read all sorts of stories about Bigfoot and aliens and poltergeists, and it was fascinating to me. And I couldn't get enough of it. And I'm still kind of interested in it. I just read a long technical book about Bigfoot, about a Bigfoot cryptozoologist. I hope you're impressed that I know that word. Who just died recently and was supposed to be like the godfather of all the Bigfoot studies. So I tracked down and I read his book, which was quite detailed. So it still is with me. My nephew, I say this in the book, my nephew Matthew asked me, do you think, which I thought he's very perceptive, do you think that your interest in Bigfoot and the paranormal was a sign of your interest in religion, in the supernatural? And I would say the answer is no, because I saw those as distinct. But the idea that there's another kind of world out there is kind of fascinating.
Right.
I think that the world of religion, though, for me is more present. And I will say, till we get into some Bigfoot, we can talk about Bigfoot all day if you want to. I will say the most compelling evidence for are the sightings that reliable people have. That's the most compelling evidence for. The most compelling evidence against is no remains, no bones, no fur, so I'm not sure where I stand.
Gotta have faith, Jim. Gotta have faith.
There you go.
I do want to know, do you believe those aliens are out there? Because everybody's talking about them right now. What do you think?
You know what? Yes.
Oh boy, on record.
I mean, I think, look, the probability that we're alone is so infinitesimal.
Exactly.
Now, and I think some of those videos that you see, those Air Force videos from like 2016, they're pretty convincing. I mean, if pilots don't know what these things are.
Wow.
On the other hand, someone said to me recently that, you have to wonder if these are just drones, from from China or something, or maybe they're drones from outer space. I don't know. I think, though, it's unlikely that, we're never going to find out. The president said recently he's going to release everything. I don't see any big smoking gun there. So who knows? I'm going to stick to what I know.
Yeah. Well, we're not alone. When we talked about a lot of stuff, some things that are very productive and some things that were really interesting. And I think one of the ways that a lot of people don't know that they're not alone and that there is availability for that changed my life before I became a priest and changed my priesthood drastically, especially as I continue to develop in it, and that is the concept of spiritual direction. And one of the things I wanted to say on this is, now that Linda, the one who trained me in spiritual direction from the Charlotte Spirituality Center, which is that there are people out there in the world available to hold space in spiritual direction. And I think it's something that many people don't know is available in this moment. And it's a very powerful thing to have people with the gift, as we would call in Catholicism, the charism to listen to people, but also who've gone through the training to deeply listen to people. And because of that, I wanted to yield the floor to the person who trained me in spiritual direction and has a lot of Jesuit spirituality living inside of her, and that's Linda Sarepta.
Hey, oh, Father Jim, hi. You know, this is so synchronicity. I just had a beautiful conversation with Connor Reedy today
Oh my gosh.
at Outreach, and we're looking to do some collaboration with our Center for Spiritual Direction, our students in training for their practicum to offer spiritual direction to some of your folks in community. Anyway, small
Small
world.
world.
Small world, small world. Anyway, my question for you, and I've yet to read your book, but I look forward to buying it from Barefoot. And I will do that. But I am always, as a spiritual director, intrigued by the use of words that people choose when they speak. And so you chose the title Work in Progress. And so I would love for you to say, why did you choose that title for your book? And how do you personally assess spiritual progress?
Oh my God. Oh, wow. I can tell you're a spiritual director. I can just tell from some of the way I can just tell.
Great one.
Where did work in progress come from? And afterwards, I want to answer or mention Virginia Blas's question. Where did work in progress come from? So some of you may know on Fridays, I just had it a couple hours ago, I have a Facebook Live face sharing Bible study session every Friday for about a half an hour. Sarah's part of it. We have about 300 people. You're welcome to come every week. In any event, I put it out there. I said, I don't know what to call this book. I was going to call it Misspent Youth because of something that happened. And my publisher said, you can't do that because people will think you regret it. And I said, well, I don't want that. So I put it out there. And someone said work in progress. And I just thought, that's fantastic. So why did I use that title? One, mainly, I am a work in progress. Two, we are all works in progress. The reader is a work in progress. But three, it is about work. It is about the progression of my work, basically. Those are works in progress. They're the progression of my jobs. What does spiritual progress mean? Gosh, I think it just means becoming more and more aware of God's presence in your life. That's what I would say. And we hope growing in holiness too. Because as you know, I'm sure you know this, it can't just be me and God. It has to sort of have fruits, right? And I think if you're really making progress or deepening, I would say might be a better word, then you're becoming a holier and kinder and a more loving and more compassionate person. So that's what I would say progress is. Although we always feel that we're stepping, we're going backwards.
Beautiful answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I
I do want to say I do want to give voice to Virginia.
Virginia, yeah.
Let me read her comment. Virginia Blast says, "Thank you for everything you are sharing. When you mentioned the injustice of decisions, i.e. data centers, very recently I've been involved in local government to stop a data center in a nearby town. With overwhelming information and evidence to the overall destruction of nature, draining resources and quality of life, it is difficult to understand why local politicians are going forward with data centers. It is an injustice of decision-making for those who will be impacted. Thank you for the insight." Thank you, Virginia. Yeah, and that is what Pope Leo points out in the encyclical. It is about this disparity of decision-making power. But thank you, Linda, for that great question. You sound like a great director.
Yes. It totally is.
Thank you. I think I froze for just a moment, but thank you for such a beautiful answer.
You're welcome.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming. And I want to say that when I was being trained by Linda, she would always say to me, follow the fruit, follow the fruit.
Totally.
And that's so powerful. And that's what I want to end with, unless you have something to say, or Johan does, or anyone else.
Well, gosh, well, Johan, do you want to say something, and then I'll wrap up.
I have a question for you, Father Martin.
Sure.
A different perspective here in Korea, where I work. Some of my transgender friends have a saying. They say, if you can do anything, just stay alive. Just being alive is a testimony. And in work in progress, you reflect on how God kind of shapes us through the ordinary experiences, the struggles, and sometimes those things only make sense in hindsight. In where I am, and I cannot speak for the United States or anywhere else, but where I am, many LGBTQ Christians are simply trying to remain faithful while carrying a lot of wounds from society and sometimes also from the church, that speaks more about them than with them. Some stay invisible, some tend to disappear quietly. And that makes me wonder, if God shapes us through stories we only understand later, what happens when the church is sometimes too slow to recognize the stories through which God may be trying to shape it? How do we discern God's voice in those lives before hindsight becomes regret?
Well, that's very timely. I mean, we're coming up, I was just thinking as you were talking of the 10th anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, Florida, which was the thing that sort of started me off, at least on my public ministry with LGBTQ people. By the same token, we just had this release of a report from the Vatican, which for the first time included the voices of 2 married gay men, which was really shocking to people and really upsetting to a lot of people. And I think the key is to just continue to ask the church and to invite the church and to show the church what it means to listen. It's very hard for people. I was at the Synod of Bishops for October 2023 and October 2024, and I met people from all over the world who they just couldn't hear it. And I think I had this sort of false idea that if I just sat down with people and I would tell them stories about LGBTQ people that I knew, right? Like true stories, obviously, it would just convert them. And guess what? It didn't, which was kind of a shock to me. You'd say, and they say, well, yeah, but that's unnatural. I think so. You have to we get back to the question of suffering and experience. I think one of the things that people have to have is a firsthand experience with those kinds of things, a firsthand experience with an LGBTQ person, to really begin to understand this is who these people are. They're not other, they're not stranger, they're not foreigners. There are friends, there are family members, there are people in the parishes. But I also think it's something that someone said to me towards the end of the synod was really moving. They said, you might be disappointed that change hasn't happened, but and maybe Linda will agree with this, the Holy Spirit takes time. And which is a frustration for me, because I don't like that. And I think in the United States, I would also say this is a little churchy, but I think in the United States, when things happen in the Catholic Church, we tend to say, big deal. Like when Pope Francis allowed blessings of same-sex couples, and we say, big deal. Let me tell you, that's a big deal in East Africa and Poland and India and Latin America. So a lot of it's also seeing these things from a universal perspective, like what's going on in the universal church. But I think the continual call is to do what Jesus did, which is listen to people.
Thank you very much. I must say there's a PFLAG, KP-FLAG, Korean PFLAG group here. And the last time I visited, there were 2 Jesuit priests and 4 Benedictine nuns who are helping out and joining. And it's a space for listening. Parents of LGBTQ kids come and speak openly about their questions and concerns and fears, and LGBTQ people come and share with their parents. And so, yeah, listening. I think the stories I hear there are also very much about how people change because of listening and encounters.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I would also say that I do know that my book, Building a Bridge, is available in Korean.
Yes.
So That's a good thing too. Before we end, I do want to say thank you to Bigfoot Books. Thanks to my friend Father Costello for interviewing me and for asking such deep and profound questions. Thanks everyone for joining us online. I do want to put a plug in at the end for the book if you haven't read it. It is work in progress. Confessions of a Busboy, Dishwasher, Caddy, Usher, Factory Worker, Bank Teller, Corporate Tool, and Priest. It's available in print, obviously, but also as an ebook and then as an audiobook, which I read. So I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, thanks very much and God bless you.
Yeah, I want to say something to you right here at the end. It's to you, Father Martin, because I was listening to a song on the way here, and it's a song written to kind of reframe faith away from the hate that it has been steeped in oftentimes in our culture and in our faith traditions. And it says, it's talking about, I want the faith of Martin, talking about Martin Luther King Jr. And it says, part of the song says, I might not get there with you, but I know that we shall overcome. And I want to say to you, you're working really hard, and I know the church is very slow. And that there may come a time in your life where you say, hey guys, I might not get there with you, but I want to say to you, Father Martin, there's going to come a generation where we shall overcome. And I look forward to beating down the doors of the church to make you a saint once they figure out once they figure out the truth about LGBT people in the fullness of time.
Well, that's very kind. Thanks a lot. And I hope I have Martin Luther King's face. That would be a great blessing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone. Thanks for everyone for especially setting it up on streaming, which is helping so many people join us today. So thank you so much.
Have a great night.
All right. God bless you.